Superstar wide receiver Tyreek Hill has been released by the Miami Dolphins. And as you could expect, a lot of people immediately turned their attention to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Why? Because this is the third year in a row that wide receivers are going to be of high priority and a topic of conversation surrounding the Pittsburgh Steelers. 2 off seasons ago in 2024, they traded Deontay Johnson. They had a dynamic duo at that point of Deontay Johnson and George Pickens, and they said, you know what? We want to go a different direction. We're going to trade away Deontay Johnson. They bring in Dante Jackson, and that only worked for a handful of weeks before his back injury started flaring up. But the question then became, after you trade away Deontay, who do you replace him with in the wide receiver depth chart? Who do you put alongside George Pickens for the 2024 season? And the answer wound up being nobody. Nobody. They drafted Roman Wilson, but that year Roman Wilson dealt with a lot of injuries. It was a de facto redshirt season for Roman Wilson. They were involved in a heck of a lot of Brandon Ayuk drama, but that never came to pass. Instead, Ayuk decided to re-up and stay with the San Francisco 49ers. And the Steelers went through the 2024 season with a clear need that was never addressed at wide receiver. They brought in Mike Williams halfway through the year, and he caught one great go ball against the Washington Commanders and then disappeared. Then in 2025, they decide, well, let's just kind of build from the bottom again. They trade away George Pickens this time, bring in DK Metcalf, and once again are still left without a wide receiver too. Calvin Austin is a good receiver. I have faith in Roman Wilson, but he didn't click in 2025. And for a second consecutive year, they went without a real answer at wide receiver too. And overall, they didn't get enough from that position. DK Metcalf was, as advertised, he was a number one guy, but Kenneth Gainwell was your second leading receiver when it came to receiving yards and your number one receiver when it came to receptions in the 2025 season. So because of all of this, once again, you are going to be the team, if not one of the top 5 teams that anybody looks to the second a wide receiver becomes available. Thus enters Tyreek Hill, the first huge name to be dropped onto the free agent market in the 2026 offseason. Released by the Miami Dolphins after a year in which he missed most of it due to an ACL tear and a dislocated knee that he suffered in week 4 against the New York Jets. But even in that, his first 4 weeks were pretty good. 21 receptions, 265 yards and a touchdown. Was it to his typical standard? No, he had 2 subpar games in week 1 and week 3, but he did have a 100-yard receiving game in week 2, and it looked like he was well on his way against the New York Jets before suffering that injury. With Tyreek Hill, my overall opinion is that should not be one of your top 5 options going into this offseason if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. His availability is in question to begin with, right? He's not coming off of a minor injury. He's not even coming off of, it's weird to say this in 2026, but just a torn ACL. He's coming off of a torn ACL and a dislocated knee. So his availability through most of the summer sessions is not in question. He's just not going to be there. His availability for week 1 is in question. Who knows when you get Tyreek Hill back, and who knows what he looks like when you do. The biggest strength of Tyreek Hill has always been his speed. There's a reason his nickname is the Cheetah. What is he going to look like after coming back from that injury? Where is his speed going to be at when he comes back from that injury? There is the off the field drama as well. And a lot of people are going to ask, is that worth it? My personal opinion, when it comes to off the field drama, you got a little bit of it with DK Metcalf. But again, I don't really blame him too much for the incident in Detroit. Yes, you still need to keep it between the lines and make smarter decisions. But that was one moment in an entire season. So you got a little bit of that with DK, not a whole lot. But if you were going to deal with the level of off the field drama that Tyreek Hill is bringing to your organization, I would have just kept George Pickens. He's younger, he is more talented, and overall, I think he is just a better wide receiver at this point in time. So I would have just kept George Pickens if I was going to deal with the drama to have a top-tier wide receiver. I just don't think, mainly about the availability and the questions about what he's going to be when he returns from this injury, I just don't think it's worth it for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Do I think they need to add a wide receiver? 1,000%. I started off this video saying that this is offseason number 3 where they have a hole at wide receiver. They shuffled the deck chairs last year, added DK Metcalf, and for a couple of weeks, they answered those questions because they had DK and they had George Pickens. And then you trade away Pickens, you create the same hole you had, and once again, you never filled it. So there are options out there. Tyreek Hill is one of those options, but he's one that I would just steer clear of, especially if you are able to go out there early in free agency or early in the NFL draft and add a guy to be right next to DK Metcalf. If I'm looking at free agency, I'm looking at Rashid Shaheed. I think you could use a burner. You certainly could use somebody that helps you in the return game because the Steelers' return game has been dormant for a very long time. He just showed what he could be and how important he could be to a team in that run towards a Super Bowl with the Seattle Seahawks. So if you're able to get him, that would be terrific. Now, the price tag might be pretty high because he is coming off of a Super Bowl in which he was a noticeable part of. But I think Rashid Shaheed checks almost every box for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Jauan Jennings is a name that we've tossed out there and talked about in Pittsburgh for years now. The San Francisco 49ers are moving on, but that doesn't mean he's not an optimal supplementary player, an optimal supplementary wide receiver for a star like DK Metcalf. That he couldn't be a good 2 turned into a 3 if Calvin Austin is re-signed and takes another step forward, if Roman Wilson emerges and becomes that number 2 guy, or if you draft somebody and sign Jauan Jennings, you could still have Jennings be a really good number 3. So I like Jauan Jennings a lot. I like Marquise Brown a lot as well. He had a decent comeback year for the Kansas City Chiefs, but this is a guy that I think is better than what he showed last year. And I think you could get the best out of him if you bring him to Pittsburgh. So those are just a couple of names that stood out to me when I took a cursory glance at the free agents available. And then you look at the draft and there's plenty of names there. If you want to trade up and get a little crazy with it, Carnell Tate is a guy that could significantly change what this offense looks like in 2026. I mean, we've seen it for years. Ohio State wide receivers just work. JSN in Seattle. I mean, Chris Olave, for the most part, in New Orleans. These OSU wide receivers are impact players. So if you want to trade up, I mean, the Steelers do have a lot of draft capital. If you want to trade up and make a splash, Carnell Tate is there. The 2 guys from Indiana coming off a national championship, Omar Cooper Jr. and Elijah Surratt. Those are names that I'd be interested in bringing in Pittsburgh. Mekhi Lemon out of USC. These are all guys that you could grab in the first round. I'm not sold on the quarterback situation in the NFL draft, so I would go with wide receiver. Either wide receiver or defensive back. That's kind of my initial thoughts on the NFL draft, but it all boils down to this. I named 7 guys there. All 7 of them would be higher on my list than Tyreek Hill, and I could probably find another 5 or 6. So while I do think Tyreek Hill is a name that's going to be talked about a lot, if I'm the Steelers, I'm steering clear. Let me know in the comment section. Would you target Tyreek Hill to come in and finally fill the hole that was voided by Deontay Johnson in 2024, or are you looking somewhere else for that? But that's going to do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Remember to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy this content. More Steelers content coming all off-season long leading up to the draft and then into the off-season programs. But that's it for this video. We'll see you guys next time.